I would like to start the show with you, sir. I think generally we've heard what masses say about, child rights and what they thought the government ought to do, what it doesn't ought to do. But, to get the basics straight first, when we talk of a child, what do we mean?
The definition of a child, or the age by reference to which a child is defined in our laws, it varies depending on what law we're talking about. So, for instance, in the Pakistan Penal Code, if you look at Section 82, which has been introduced after the 2016 amendments, we'll be discussing later, hopefully. A child can be legally held responsible in criminal law when he has attained the age of 10 years, for example. So that is quite low. But that is for different purposes. If you look
previously it was much lesser.
Yes, it was 7 years old. So it's been increased, and still 10 years old is quite low. But in other respects, Child Marriage Restraint Act 1929, again, that has been amended. And after amendments, a girl, for instance, attains majority to be of marriageable age at 16. Whereas a boy has to be 18 years old.
But sir, that is also only in, I think, Punjab, KP and Balochistan. In Sindh, both of them need to be at least, there's a lot of discrepancy.
The point here, that we have under discussion, that there is no one coherent age as such. But if you look at the fact that, you have to get your national identity registered at the age of 18, and you are entitled to become a registered voter at the age of 18. And then the fact that under the UN Child Rights Convention, the age of majority has been set at 18. So by and large, one could say that it's 18 years of age when you cease to be a child and you attain, full legal age.
In most
the sense that you earn the capacity.
Exactly.
Yes. You earn the
again, like in the Constitution.
Enter into legal arrangements.
Exactly. Enter into sign a contract or for that matter.
Exactly.
Other than, of course, marriage, which the 3 provinces, like we earlier pointed out, have a different age for. But having said that, your point is very well noted that, of course, there is a discrepancy. And I think that in itself is a very big issue, because until unless you know for sure that, this is like one codified age in which,
Exactly. I mean, I'd like to add to it that if you look at Article 25A in the Constitution, free education has to be provided to all children at the primary level. And impliedly, what that article means is that you attain majority when you're of 15 years of age. So, I mean, there are so many different laws with different ages set for when someone ceases to be a child and attains, full legal capacity. Given that discrepancy, it is a bit difficult to come with one coherent answer to that very wide question.
Which is why I exactly asked this question, so that people know that, these are the problems in our laws. So you have to keep that narrative in mind that, keeping in mind which law is in question, you will be judged according to that. But taking the discussion a step further, sir, since you're a lawyer and you would like to benefit from your presence here, what rights do children generally have in Pakistan? Do you think that the laws we have, the legal system as it is it adequately protecting them?
You see, the answer to what rights do children have in Pakistan is, of course, going to be it's based upon the question of what rights children ought to have. And those rights, by and large, were agreed upon by the international community way back in 1989, when the CRC, as it is known, Child's Right Convention, was agreed upon, and Pakistan became a signatory to the same in 1990. And there are a huge amount of rights that the convention encompasses, that it even envisages for state parties to adhere to, ranging from your civil and political rights for children to their economic and social rights. And a lot of times, the child rights are attached to, and again, they're based upon their parents' and guardians' rights. So how much rights do the parents have, for example, to social allowance or to social security? That is going to have a direct impact upon the child's own welfare. Similarly, the fact that the convention envisages that the state parties are going to protect the health of children, they are going to provide health facilities. So we have laws in Pakistan which do aim to, for instance, one of the commenters in the video also said that infant mortality rate is very high. And so, basic facilities for children, those are what Pakistani laws do envisage.
And all the constitution provisions,
itself.
Exactly. They apply, to children as they do to people like us, adults, the sick, poor, rich, everyone. Everybody's equally covered.
When we talk about children, it's their health, it's their rights to education, it's their rights to profess their religion, their rights to the parents being able to impart them religious education. So these are the civil and political
rights. And the right
rights.
to be treated equally.
Right to be treated equally. Of course, in certain respects they can't be because they haven't attained full legal majority in the sense of, like you mentioned, entering into contracts. But on the other hand, there are other kinds of rights which the criminal law must protect, because we know that children are vulnerable by the very fact that, of course, they haven't reached the age of majority. They are vulnerable. They are under influence of their elders, and by elders I don't just mean parents and relatives. You know, their teachers.
The society at large.
So we need to ensure that there is no misuse of authority against them. And then another aspect that comes in is, of course, the class distinctions. Because a child who does not belong to the upper echelons of the society is much more vulnerable to exploitation, human trafficking.
Right.
So saving children from sexual abuse, saving them from physical abuse,
these
corporal punishment.
laws I would like you to comment on, but sir, later in the later part of the show. But coming back to what you were saying, generally if you were to analyze from a legalist perspective, I think the laws are all there, and to that you would agree with me.
And in the last 3 years, there have been massive reforms.
So many other laws, and most of the laws, like the ones that you even mentioned, like the custody laws, all of them have the child's welfare as paramount. So that is something
best interests of the child.
Best interests of the child, exactly. But I think the problem as it is lies in the implementation. But coming to you, madam, what do you feel that, what is the main reason because of which there has been a rise in schizophrenia, anxiety, behavior disorders when it comes to children today?
Well, I think there are multiple reasons. You can't just, sort of blame it to one particular reason. The social structure, the genetics play a role, the society plays a role, the parenting style, the school, everything.
I think the stress plays a very important role
too. Absolutely. There's peer pressure. The fact that when we were growing old, there were less pressure as compared to what the children have to go through right now.
Exactly.
There's performance anxiety that comes in, be the best, that's coming in. There's a lot of judgment that comes in.
And also I've seen recently a lot of people, even a lot of children around me, they've developed this new disorder. Of course, it's not new in that sense, but new for us, attention deficit, and it just starts from watching TV, that you just can't remain focused on one thing for, more than a couple of minutes, which is actually very sad.
Absolutely. There I would say that the parents play a huge role. We are enabling our children, we are facilitating them, because we don't have the time, we don't make the effort. So what we do is we hand over the gadget to them, and that's where it all starts. I've seen kids as a few months old babies. The phone is in their hands.
There you go.
They are watching. They're so engrossed in it. They're least, they are least aware of what's happening around them, and that starts playing in their vulnerable minds at that age.
But of the teenagers that come to you, madam, because I think this is a question that is of great interest to me at least, that are they like boys who complain of such disorders more, or mental illnesses, so to speak, or is it the girls who are more, you feel they are more, open to, a more vulnerable that way to falling prey to such illnesses?
Actually, interestingly, both now. The interesting fact that, boys is as vulnerable as a female. And there's no, sort of disparity, I would say, or there's no this thing that particular gender is being more targeted. It's both. It's a mixture of, because we all human beings go through the same emotions, basically. We're pretty much the same. And now the good part is that the men are aware of it.
And they're also more open about it.
They're more open about it, and they walk into the clinics themselves and say, what, I think I need help. I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I don't know what to do with my life.
But madam, is that always the case? Because I do see a lot of patients as well, both men and women, they are in self-denial too. Like if they get physically injured, they would go to a doctor. But when it comes to their own mental health, they know that, they are chronically depressed, but they still would fight going to a psychologist.
Absolutely. The stigma attached to it holds them back from, approaching us. Because the society, I'm sorry, is very judgmental. So when there's no acceptance, unless they reach a breaking point, they would not come up for help.
But I think in that way, I think I would really, really feel sorry for the children then, because then they can't even express themselves. And considering, that all such, illnesses that we've spoken about are on the rise, I think parents need to be more sympathetic and, more accepting towards such illnesses.
Parents need to be present. I mean, first formative years of the child are so important, and the absentee of parenting or the families are going to, that is actually why there's a rise in the issues, because the parents are absent. The child needs the parent over there, and in their absence a lot happens.
I think that's a good message that you're giving out to the parents who are watching the show. But coming to you, madam, your work is something, of course, which is very commendable, because you're reaching out to children itself. It's very children oriented. You're reaching out to neglected children, abandoned children, and children who are also child beggars. So what exactly does your bureau do to help these children out?
All right. So the Child Protection and Welfare Bureau is the only government department in Pakistan who's working on eradication of child abuse, child beggary, street children, giving shelter to street children, and child domestic labor violence. So what happens is that whenever there's a helpline which we have, which is 1121, it's a 24-hour helpline. So when we get a call on our helpline by a police station or a hospital or from some media person, media channels help us a lot in this cause. When we get a call, our rescue team immediately leaves and rescues the child first, who's subjected to this sort of any violence, or he's alone, he's abandoned, anything. We get the child, we present him to our child protection court, we take the custody.
But is it always necessary that you have to get this call in order for you to go out and save or rescue that child? But shouldn't such checkups be routine, just looking out for children who are left out on the streets, or who are neglected, or who are forced into different kinds of exploitation?
So with respect to child beggary, our team regularly on a daily basis takes a round of the entire district where we are present right now. So of that entire city, and checks where if there's any child on a street left abandoned, or if they're child beggars, and we conduct rescue operations on them. But other than that, if there's some infant left alone in a hospital or a police station, then they call us, because we can't find out about that.
Of course.
We go and rescue the child. In the last 10 months, I would like to mention that the Child Protection Bureau has reunified more than 150 children, missing children with their parents, and have rescued more than 1,500 children to child beggars, only from Lahore. The figures I'm giving are only from Lahore. And there are 200 cases of child abuse in Punjab, in which I've personally gotten involved and have got the culprit arrested, and have followed up till the.
I was just about to ask you that to what extent is the bureau's role? Is it only to the extent of reunification of the child with the family? Is it to the extent of, also I do understand that you help families adopt children as well, or is it to the extent that you take them to court and then you counsel the child and help them reintegrate back into life?
Okay, so I'll go step by step. Talking about child abuse, if there's a case of child abuse, we go and rescue the victim first, and then we provide the victim counseling, so that, to build confidence in him. We have a team of psychologists in our bureau. Then what we do is we convince the family also to file an FIR, because we've seen cases where the family associates shame and honor with any sexual abuse case.
And you do fund such cases as well?
Yes, we do. So we convince them, and then we get the FIR filed. Our legal team stays there with the family, and then we make sure that the culprit is arrested, and we follow up the case till the entire process is completed and the culprit is held accountable, because that's very important.
I think that's such a long process that way, but adoption is something that really interests me, because considering that there's no one specific law regarding adoption in Pakistan, and a lot of couples from abroad, they come here, they want to adopt. So I think bureaus like your own, I think they're very helpful in that regard. So how does that work?
Okay, in the last 10 months we've given more than 150 infants for temporary custody. It's not called adoption, but we call it temporary custody, which is which is present in our Punjab Destitute and Neglected Children's Act. What happens is, if a couple is interested in adopting a child, whether it's an infant or anybody, so they come to us, they apply, and then through the Child Protection Court, the court judges does a background check on the family, and then there's a whole procedure which goes about, and then we give the child for adoption or temporary custody, and then we also follow up later to see how the child is doing.
Coming to you, sir, basically, I think we've had a general overview of a lot of issues. Child abuse, like she also pointed out, Miss Sarah herself, is a very relevant issue, and I think any discussion about child rights is incomplete unless we talk about it. Recently, 2016 onwards, there have been quite a few amendments in our laws, all of which have been geared basically to take this, offense more seriously. So tell us about those. Do you think that these amendments have actually helped us achieve the change that we wanted to bring?
These amendments have come into effect after the, I should say, scathing report that was issued by the UN Child Rights Convention in its 5th periodic review of our report, the concluding observations that the United Nations gave on Pakistan's progress, or perhaps the lack of it, with regards to child rights, prompted these amendments, the legislative statutory amendments, and Pakistan brought forward a lot of them. One of them being, of course, the Pakistan Penal Code. It was realized that our statute book in relation to criminal law had to be updated. So there are a lot of key reforms which pertain to various aspects of child abuse, because when we say child abuse, a lot of people presume that it's only child sexual abuse.
Exactly.
But that's one form of child abuse. You know, there's child physical abuse as well, in terms of corporal punishment or, you know, child labor. That can actually result in infliction of torture and cruel and degrading treatment or punishment of the child.
Exactly,
So,
or lack of care for that
Exactly.
matter, and even making the child see pictures which are inappropriate, especially after the amendments.
So that has led to a major overhaul of our criminal justice system, as well as of our criminal laws as they are on the statute book. So some of the key changes made here that there are sections pertaining to child sexual abuse, how that is a crime in its own right. I mean, of course, there were a lot of crimes related to sexual abuse,
But they
and
want
children
for
could be covered in it,
specific.
but this is specifically targeted at those who perpetrate sexual crimes against children. And so under section 377 of the PPC, now child sexual abuse, which means again age, you know, anyone who is of less than 18 years of age, and if they are lured into sexual activities, or if they are made to carry out sexual activities, regardless of consent, because we know that a child lacks the capacity to consent.
Exactly.
That
Or even
is
if
a
they
criminal
would
offense.
consent, it would be a deceptive kind of a consent.
Yes,
They wouldn't
and-
be knowing what they're getting into.
And interestingly, the penalties, you know, that are going to follow,
Yes, those have been increased,
they
and
have
that
been
is said to
increased.
be a very
That is a very
positive step.
progressive step indeed. Because earlier, whenever I would look at, you know, the, for instance, getting a child forcibly married at a young age, the penalties were and are very low. I mean, 1,000 rupees fine, 1 month imprisonment, that is hardly a deterrent. But with respect to child sexual abuse under section 377 that I've talked about, they could be 7 years imprisonment at, you know, at maximum, and there
Along
could
with
be a
the
5
fine.
million rupees fine. Although I wouldn't say that a child who's been a victim should ever be stigmatized, but somehow the child wouldn't want to be looked on as a victim by the rest of the society. They
Of
would
course.
want to grow out of the
Because that
shadow
way
of
then they are
that
singled
horrific
out
past.
and they are put out there in the society. But you know, moving forward, I understand that of
Yes.
course all these developments have come and the punishments are now more aggressive than what they were before. But do you think practically this has made any change?
These reforms came about just 3 years ago. So, I mean, we still need to see what direction things go in, but I think that there is an impetus to improve not just the law on our statutes, but also in effect, in practice. And that explains why there have been new boards that have been established in 2000 and, you know, there is a new Islamabad Capital Territory Child Protection Act.
Right.
Of 2018, and then there are other laws as well, which remain to be implemented, like the National Commission for Child Protection Act. It allows for and it provides for setting up child protection advisory boards. There will be child protection officers who can receive complaints or reports of any child who is being abused. They could then take the child in their custody. For example, the parents are themselves the tyrants and they are themselves the oppressors of the children. So in that sense, these boards are entrusted with the task of removing the child from custody, which is harmful to the children, and they are not just their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being.
well-being,
So
the
that's
powers are very
important.
all-encompassing.
And like I said, you know, these amendments which have been made, cruelty to child. Now there's a separate section in our Pakistan Penal Code on that, and one thing that I find extremely progressive about that section is that not only can that offense be committed through a positive action, but also by omission.
As well. Yeah, that is something very interesting. That is something we usually didn't. In fact, we didn't
Yeah,
have
commission by
it
omission, we did not
exactly.
have
It's
that
something we
concept here.
usually have in the West. But I think that again, I do feel that, like you rightly pointed out, there should be more time given to see actually how these laws, you know, practically, you know, get to be implemented. But at least the yardstick is now
And there's one
set
thing
higher.
which we would never talk about, and that is Section 292 and the reforms which have been brought about in the Pakistan Penal Code. With regard to that, there are now Section 292A and B and C, which deal with luring children into sexual activities and towards sexual conduct.
Exactly.
And
or even exposing them to
exposing them to, you know, under Section 292A, and most importantly, child pornography, which is a huge menace, not just here, not just in the subcontinent or Southeast Asia,
but all over the world, of course.
It is a menace that somehow there is no solution to it. The world is still trying to grapple with the challenge at hand, but hopefully now that we've started talking about it, now they are separate.
And hopefully now that we have laws to guide us, especially stricter laws, let's hope that there's more deterrence. But Madam, coming to you, a very valid point that Muneeb earlier raised during the conversation was about consent. Now, a lot of children who are exploited, they might have deceptively consented to the act, you know, not knowing what consequences it would lead to.
Yeah.
So, you know, what responsibility lies on professional like yourself to actually help these, you know, children and to educate them and to tell them how to say no?
You know, we come at a much later stage. The first and the foremost, you know, sort of place where this thing needs to have intervention is at home. The parents have to be aware. They have to cater to the safety of the child. They are too busy, not looking. They're not actually fending the children, and you know, for whatever reasons, they might not be at home for their work or whatever. They leave the kids in the hands of people they have no idea of. And most of the cases, I tell you, the parents are not even aware of what has been happening to their children. Not up till in fact, in all their lives they would never know.
Till the time it's diagnosed. And I think the parents who do know, they maybe want to be in denial, they just don't want to accept it.
Absolutely in denial. You know, I've had children go up to their parents and confess that this is happening. Guess what? They look the other way and they say, oh no, you're just making it up.
So how do you treat patients when they come to you in such a state that, you know, their parents are not believing them, they want medical help from, you know, doctors like yourself? You know, so what do you do?
You know, as it is, it's a trauma that they go through. And the worst, the bigger trauma is they approach the, you know, family, and guess what? The family looks the other way, or they're in denial, or the child has no place to go. So when there's this hopelessness that comes in, and when they cannot deal with their anxiety and depression, and they know they're really slipping down, it's the, you know, sort of, it's the time that they realize that they need to reach out for help. When we have intervention, we like the family to come in, but the family does not take interest. They also, in fact, I'm sorry to admit that, but a lot of families, a lot of parents don't even encourage the child to seek help, let alone that they will come and help them.
And for the families that do agree to seek help, what kind of treatments do you offer them?
It depends on the kind of trauma they're going through, right? There are different kind of interventions based on their age, the experience and all that. So for the kids, obviously, there is a different sort of treatment plan for them. There's play therapy, there is sand therapy. Obviously, because they can't articulate, they cannot really verbalize what's been happening. So indirectly, metaphorically, you know, sort of we get to know whatever is happening in their life. But when they're adults, they're able to, you know, sort of...
so I believe then the therapy and the treatments might be quite long, like some of them might be just lifelong for that matter.
You know, even it takes, it's a lot of patient work, because it takes a person who's been holding trauma for such a long time and is encouraged to hold it back, and the fear of the society, being judged, and you know, so when they come to us, they don't open up for a very long time, because we as a society condemn it.
But do you, like as a psychologist, follow up on them regularly?
No, yes, definitely, because we're the only saviors in their life at that moment.
Which is why I asked you that question, that I think doctors and psychologists, they have a very important role in that way of educating the patient.
Interestingly, sometimes the parents don't even know anything about the life that they share with us, and they'll never know. That's the sad part. They imagine that your kid or you pass away not knowing fully the depth of the...
Which is actually very sad if you come to think of it.
It's heart-wrenching.
Yeah,
it's sad is one thing, it's heart-wrenching.
And whenever we think of reform, you know, that way, I think in that way, psychologists like yourself have a very important role to play. But coming to you, madam, I think generally you earlier told us the work that your bureau is doing, but I also understand the fact that, you know, and I think this is on reported media as well, that you get a lot of prank calls and a lot of people pretend. So how do you distinguish the real cases from the fake one in this regard?
Okay, so I've experienced this only once or twice since my joining, that sometimes in with respect to child domestic labor, people have tried to get other people of their own locality into trouble, and by calling us and reporting that there was somebody employed who's below 12 years of age, and they're making her do really like rigorous work at home. So we've checked, and that was just it was a fake call. So sometimes these things happen out of some enmity or rivalry going on. So neighbors, so they do that. So we've experienced this.
But moving on from there, I think a very important issue which has all again come to light recently is the fact that we see, not in your particular bureau, but there have been cases when child protection officers or officers themselves they've misused their power, and they've also tried to exploit the child. So what checks and balances are in place, at least to the extent of your bureau, to ensure that the children who are living there, they are safe?
All right. So we have a zero tolerance policy towards child abuse or any form of child torture, because of course when I'm going out on the streets and then I'm advocating it and I'm talking about eradicating child abuse, and I have to first make sure that everything in my bureau is going perfect with respect to these children. So what I've done is we've placed cameras in every room and every place where children are. So this is done to keep a check, because they're living there also. I have more than 1,000 children with me in Punjab right now. So to keep a check on the child attendants who are with them, although our child protection officers interview the child attendant before hiring them, but still you never know about anybody's tendencies, they can change later on.
Of course.
Yes. So
and but do they like undergo some kind of a training to be able to handle the child? Because I do understand this is a very specific and a very particular kind of job. They need to have the right expertise to be able to handle the child.
So in their CVs they check what experience they've had earlier, if they've been dealing with children or not, but other than that not any particular training. But our officers right now have an experience of more than 15 years, so they're quite qualified and competent.
And then of course you also have a team of lawyers, and then you have a team of psychologists, doctors, psychiatrists, everybody is on board.
That's
basically.
true. We have a child protection court also inside the bureau, which is a model institute.
It covers everything. But when it comes to rehab, I think a very important part that we often ignore is also rehab of the perpetrator, of the person who's actually committed that offense, who's put that children in that sorry position. So is like your bureau intending to work on that?
Okay, so only with respect to child beggars, when we've experienced this thing that the parents are not letting go of that child who they've put into that profession. So our counselors come into play there. They convince the parents of that we'll provide the child a better future. So it's good. So we convince them to give that child to us, to our custody. That's where we provide counseling to the parent. Also in child abuse cases, we try to convince the parents to file an FIR, because in most of the cases they're not willing to file an FIR. And
so basically it's to the extent of getting the victim justice, but not rehabilitation of the perpetrator itself and all. That was just a question I was asking for my clarification. Of course, the masses clarification too.
I just want to mention one thing. When we get child beggars, they need a lot of rehabilitation also, because they have runaway tendencies. They're very unhappy and upset, because for them it's like us kidnapping them.
And how do you rehabilitate them? Do you educate them? Do you make them do constructive work?
Yeah, so we involve them in such activities so that they forget what they've gone through, the trauma. It is actually a trauma when we get them from the streets to our bureau. So we involve them with other children who've been living with us for years, who are settled, and we have we celebrate birthdays, we have activities and events to make them happy, and our child attendants and our professional managers and stuff, they spend time with them.
I think that's very good, because a very important part, of course, of treating anybody is also bringing them back to life and rehabilitating them. But sir, moving towards the conclusion of the show, just to wrap it up, basically, what reforms would you propose as a lawyer, as an analyst, since that is the capacity that you're speaking on in this show, to overall, improve a child rights system and to ensure that the children get the basic rights that they are guaranteed under the laws of Pakistan?
We, unfortunately, in Pakistan do not have a centralized database of who sexual victims are, who sex offenders are.
Exactly.
And a lot of times when sex offenders get deported from countries abroad, so there is no link or data sharing system in place between for example, FIA here and the Interpol, and this menace needs to be overcome so that we know that there might not be any child sex offender on the loose. That is what we need to guard against. There are also other laws. For instance, I just mentioned that child pornography as such has been criminalized now under our PPC. Then as far as right to education of children is concerned, the dropout rates are very high, illiteracy rates are very high, and that's alarming.
Exactly.
Also, when we teach our children, we need to sort of teach them the value of human rights. I see so many people, they graduate, they have the degrees, the qualifications in
I think
hand.
our definitions of education fundamentally need to change, exactly.
Yes,
and it should just not include formal education, it should include non-formal education.
Because they don't have the slightest idea of what human rights are, what women's rights are, and what their own rights are. And especially children, we need to educate them. And I was just having this debate with someone recently that we teach our children a lot about discipline. But a lot of times I see, elders or even parents trying to force their way upon their own children in the name of discipline, and in the whole process we forget to teach our children the value of choice, so that when they grow up or when they have control over others, they do give them choice. And when I talk about having control over others, one major, problematic area here in Pakistan, this issue is rampant. I've got 2 points to add. In fact, about special courts for children, we do have an ordinance which came on in 2000, the JJSO, Juvenile Justice System. There's something called the Zainab Alert Recovery and Response Act, which came into being in 2019, which I think again is a very progressive step. I mean, there is that ray of hope somehow, because this act provides for, especially families, parents or relatives of any missing child or any kidnapped child to approach this agency to, describe personal characteristics of the child, and then in liaison with PEMRA and PTA, this agency is responsible to get tickers running on news channels that these are the characteristics of the child.
What reform do you think needs to be done when it comes to mental health professional like yourself? How can you people be, better trained to deal with such patients to start with?
Actually, again, sort of right man for the right job. They have to be professional. They have to have a certain amount of training that legalizes them to take up children, because it's a very sensitive matter. And if if we are unable to do justice to the child at that particular time, then we're doing far more damage to them than good. So I think from time to time, like any other courses, one has to be updated with the latest information. And here I would like to add that awareness is the key. Awareness at all levels. Parents need to be aware. I think they should have psychoeducation in the school. I've always encouraged that. Most of the schools are not interested. They say it's not our domain. But I think if the school incorporates it, I think that will make a huge difference. But again, when it comes to school, only the elite few of the schools might think about it. But we need to reach out to the masses.
Your point is noted, madam, but coming to you, basically, we do know that your bureau is doing great work in this regard, but what more do you feel needs to be done by the Pakistani government to ensure that children at a very basic level get all their basic fundamental human rights?
The first thing would, in my view, would be having a child protection bureau in every province of Pakistan. Right now it's only active in Punjab. It should be there everywhere, because we get calls from all provinces where we can't intervene because it's not in our mandate. Secondly, we need reforms in police. I have seen improvements in police since I've joined, but there's room for improvement, because most of the cases they're not sensitized towards child abuse and such, towards rights of the child. So that's where we need to play our role. Also, I think civil society, media, all stakeholders need to come and join hands
at
one page to eradicate this menace, because alone one state department can't handle this.
Quickly, to just conclude, what would your message be to the viewers today?
That they should be responsible. We as citizens of Pakistan need to be responsible. Be responsible parents, be responsible employers. I've been reading in Brickin's industry, there are so many children that are employed, domestic servants, like I said, do not take on children. Try to direct them back to schools. That is where they ought to be. Be responsible consumers. Know that whatever produce that you're consuming, where is it coming from? Try to figure out whether there's no child labor that was used in producing that. So we need to be responsible at all levels.
So what would your concluding message be, madam?
I think awareness is the key. I feel that, and again, we've got to be non-judgmental, and we've got to stop stigmatizing. We need to take the ownership, like you said.
And we need to be more positive as a society.
And we need to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more educated we are, the more we get done.
Exactly.
And I think which again boils down to the same point. Awareness is the key to change.
Awareness is the key, and I think changing the mindset as well.
Absolutely.
What would your concluding message be to viewers?
So I think I would like to give a message to the parents that they should give so much love and affection and build so much trust in the child, that the child should be able to speak if he or she is going through some torture, some violence in any form, because I've seen cases where the child is scared of sharing his experiences. So this thing goes to the teachers also in school who are in direct contact with the child on a daily basis.
I think that's very rightly put, because I think nothing can actually end unless we actually educate our children, we support them and we encourage them to speak up against, different atrocities that might be committed against them. But on that note, I'll conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Mr. Muneeb. Thank you so much, Madam Sadia, and thank you so much, Madam Sara, for being here with us today. Now, to conclude today's show, the only thing that I would like to reiterate is the fact that I personally think that the only way that we can actually bring about a change, the only way we can actually strive to actually protect our children is to teach them how to say no. Until and unless we support our children, until and unless we encourage them to voice their voice against different kind of atrocities that are committed against them, I don't think that we can bring any kind of a fundamental change. So let's all strive to do just that. On that note and with that message, signing off for today. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.